If I was to ask you, what is the steel used in knife making that has the highest levels of edge retention? Many people would say Rex 121. Some people would say Maximate, and others would raise their flag for K390. And you know what? You'd all be wrong. I'm Rollshambo, and this is Steel Snobs, the series where I attempt to pull back the veil of science and metallurgy behind the knife steels that you put in your pocket every day. And today, we're going to be deep diving into a super steel that you might not be able to get your hands on for that much longer. Let's go ahead and talk about CPM 15V. My friends, welcome to the golden era of knife making. It's 2025, and whether you're someone who is an EDC fan, a collector, or even if you're just someone that relies on knives in a work capacity, one thing is for sure, we have never had as many excellent options as we do today. With popular knife super steels like MagnaCut and M390 and S90V, it can be easy to miss the forest for the trees when you're considering what knife steel you want your next EDC knife to be made out of. It begs the question, does the knife steel even matter that much? Many critics are tired of the conversation, and they would argue that the average person couldn't tell the difference between the steels if it weren't for the laser engraving on the blade. I've spent hours debating this topic with myself, just trying to be brutally honest about why the conversation is important. Is it important? It's kind of like how people view sports cars. They will tell all their friends about the horsepower, the 6-speed manual transmission, how fast it can accelerate 0 to 60, all while never actually taking it there. That same car collector who never drives that sports car probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference in performance if, for example, say someone were to break into their garage in the middle of the night and do an engine swap with that of a Subaru Forester. They would literally never know. But what about the enthusiast who buys that same sports car? I'm talking about the person who takes it on the mountain passes, the one who puts it through hundreds of thousands of miles of use. They could probably tell the difference right away if someone all of a sudden engine swapped their sports car's high-performance engine with that of a fuel-efficient, gas-saving Subaru Forester, right? Because whether you are an enthusiast or a collector, some part of you deep down cares about knowing what's possible. It's the fantasy that fuels the addiction. It's truly not that different when we're talking about the performance of different knife steels. It's true, many steels can perform similarly to each other in cut tests, but there's always going to be those that stand head and shoulders above the alternatives. I'm talking about knife super steels. CPM 15V is one such steel, a true behemoth of performance, a titan of edge retention, and a knife steel option that is fading away before our very eyes. To truly understand the rise and fall of CPM 15V, though, we need to go back to the beginning. Specifically, we need to go nearly a century back. In the 1930s, metallurgists determined that high wear resistance could be developed into steels by adding a higher vanadium content. The problem was that with the ingot-based process that they had at the time, any vanadium content exceeding 4 to 5% would result in a steel that lacked toughness. To clarify further, steel compositions containing more than 5% vanadium were considered so brittle it was determined that the steel would crack during forging, effectively halting metallurgists' efforts to use higher amounts of vanadium to achieve higher levels of wear resistance. That was true until about 1967, a time when Crucible Industries was alive and well, and oh yeah, they were also filing the patent for their powder metallurgy process. Powder metallurgy effectively took the old rules and chucked them out the window. While Crucible was not the first to utilize a powder metallurgy process in a historical sense, they were going to be the first to truly take this process mainstream, being the catalyst for something that would take steel manufacturing on a worldwide scale to the next level entirely. Let's fast forward a few years to 1973, and Crucible could be found designing steels that would be ideal for this process, specifically a steel that we currently know as CPM 10V, to which they promptly filed a British patent. Another handful of years later, in 1978, Crucible filed another patent, this time in the United States, effectively laying claim to CPM 10V, which is, pretty understandable, given that CPM 10V was a cutting-edge type of steel, and they wanted to protect their intellectual property. CPM 10V, named after its nearly 10% of vanadium content flaunted extremely high wear resistance as a byproduct of its composition, containing a high amount of vanadium. It's worth mentioning that 10V wasn't the only high wear resistant steel of its time, but its use of innovative materials science gave it superior characteristics, and its success directly led to a new generation of advancements. And you guessed it, one such advancement came in the form of CPM 15V. You see, Crucible really wanted to stretch their vanadium-enriched legs here by seeing just how far they could push the vanadium content in their steel at any cost, and I do mean at any cost. And the cost was definitely high, so if CPM 10V was named after containing nearly 10% vanadium, it shouldn't be shocking to assume that CPM 15V contains nearly 15% vanadium. That assumption would be correct. However, this super rich vanadium content poses an issue. Metallurgists found that after 11% vanadium, the carbide size would drastically increase because they would form in the liquid steel before the steel could be gas atomized into powder. This is a problem because the larger the carbides being formed, the lower the toughness of the steel. It was discovered that if they increased the liquid steel temperature, it could allow for a higher vanadium content without running the risk of forming those problematic larger carbides. And with this monumental discovery, CPM 15V was born. Now that we know how 15V got here, we need to ask the ever important question of, so what? What does it all mean? How do we quantify these hard-fought efforts in a manner that makes sense to people who aren't metallurgists? First, we will see how CPM 15V stacks up in the knife steel property ratings of one of the most respected sources of knife steel metallurgy in recent times. Laren Thomas, Dr. Laren Thomas, breaks down his knife steel property ratings into 3 categories: toughness, edge retention, that we will refer to as wear resistance, and corrosion resistance. Without diving too far down that rabbit hole, just know that the higher the number, the better the rating. For toughness, CPM 15V rates a 3.5, which for comparison's purposes, we can liken directly to M390, which is far more common of a super steel found in knife making. From the outset, 3.5 might seem low, and in the scheme of things, it is, as toughness is often something that is sacrificed on the altar of chasing wear resistance. The harder and more wear resistant a steel is, the less tough it is, and the more prone to chipping and breaking under direct stress it will be. That said, if you're concerned about the toughness, just think about the last time your M390 folding knife had any issues with chipping or with breakage, and if the answer is never, chances are you won't be bothered by the toughness of CPM 15V. Next is the true star of the show, wear resistance. Dr. Laren Thomas doesn't have many steels rated higher for wear resistance than 15V. In fact, according to the charts available on knifesteelnerds.com, there is only 2 steels rated higher for wear resistance than 15V. And that would be by a very small margin. Those steels are Maximit and Rex 121. 15V is rated at a 10, and for comparison, Maximit is rated at 11. To go back to the common super steel comparisons, M390 is rated at a 6.5 and is frequently touted as a super edge retention super steel. And even if you compare it to K390, wear resistance for K390 is listed at a 7.5. So the wear resistance for 15V isn't just marginally better, it's better by miles. Lastly is 15V's corrosion resistance rating, which is to say it's pretty lackluster, coming in at a 4. This should be no shocker. It's not a stainless steel, so aficionados who live or work out of wetter, more humid environs will probably want to make sure they're keeping their 15V blades oiled to help protect it against rust over time. Compared to other tool steels like 10V and M4, they all have similar lackluster corrosion resistance ratings of 4. Yeah, maybe don't take your newly purchased 15V Spyderco on a diving expedition. These ratings are not linear, and they are based on independent testing done by Dr. Laren Thomas that doesn't really reflect real-world usage. But let's be honest, what most enthusiasts care about is edge retention. I no longer see edge retention and wear resistance as interchangeable monikers, since while wear resistance is the property that many consider to play the largest role in a knife's ability to hold an edge, you can still lose your apex due to rust or from a lack of toughness while cutting harder fibrous materials. So With that in mind, it should be no shocker that 15V was not utilized as a knife steel overly much. It's rather rare and a bit boutique in knife making, as it's still very brittle and non-stainless, and it's also really expensive to produce. It wasn't until steel specialist Sean Houston, more widely known by the name Big Brown Bear, devised a proprietary heat treat protocol which made 15V a better knife steel. And he showed this by collaborating directly with Spyderco out of Golden, Colorado, who uses his proprietary heat treat to great effect, specifically on many of their sprint run models, which are very, very popular. Knives like the Manix 2, the Shaman, the Para 3, the Paramilitary 2, the Yojimbo, the Micro Jimbo, the Military 2, the Native 5, the Little Native. There's a lot. What the Big Brown Bear protocol achieves is high hardness of 65 Rockwell. It optimizes the steel's matrix to properly hold and support the hard vanadium carbides, making them less of a liability and also improving the toughness of the steel in spite of its high Rockwell hardness. And all of this does a wonderful job of enhancing CPM 15V's overall edge retention. But is there any real evidence of this? And how does CPM 15V stack up in a real-world cut test environment that can reflect direct controlled comparison in a fair manner? For the answer to this question, we will take a stroll over to the prominent cut test channel, Cedric and Ada. Pete from the Cedric and Ada channel documents all of the cut tests he performs, the steels used, and their direct edge geometry. His cut tests involved repeated cutting through tough fibrous rope called sisal rope, and he quite simply counts the amount of cuts until the edge will no longer reliably slice paper. It might not be the most scientific test in the world, but it accounts for a real-world cutting scenario and the direct edge geometry. Let's see what Pete's results can reveal. It turns out that Pete from Cedric and Ada has performed 3 different cut tests with CPM 15V that do an amazing job of telling the story of regular 15V versus the Big Brown Bear 15V, and the difference that even 1 degree of edge geometry can make. These 3 tests were performed with 2 different knives. One was a Skinner knife by Andrei Barukov, and the other was a more common Spyderco Paramilitary 2. The stock Paramilitary 2 with a belt ground factory edge at 18 degrees per side resulted in an impressive 950 cuts. This might not seem like a strong argument when compared against the traditionally heat-treated Barukov Skinner with a 17-degree hand-sharpened and polished edge that achieved 1,050 cuts. Some might even say that this disproves that the Big Brown Bear heat treat protocol even does anything worthwhile, but they'd be wrong for 2 very distinct reasons. Number 1, the difference of 1 degree per side is a significant difference in toughness and geometry-based edge retention. And number 2, it's not exactly fair to compare a factory belt ground edge against a hand-sharpened and polished edge. The belt ground edges almost never outperform a hand-sharpened edge with the same edge geometry, let alone one that is 1 degree less per side. The next cut test proves this because Pete put a hand-sharpened and polished 17-degree edge on that very same Paramilitary 2 that just prior had only attained 950 cuts. After dropping the geometry and sharpening by hand the 15V Paramilitary 2, it absolutely blew every other knife on the datasheet out of the water with a whopping 2,000 cuts. Without a shadow of a doubt, this highlights the very undeniable advantage that the Big Brown Bear heat treat protocol provides when you're comparing the standard 15V knife against the Spyderco with the same edge angle but nearly twice the performance. And if you're interested in knowing just how impressive this really is, consider the prior reigning edge retention champion in Rex 121, who achieved over 1,500 cuts, or the runner-up in Maximate with the same hand-sharpened and polished 17-degree edge achieving 1,300 cuts. Or how about K390 with the same geometry on its best day that never capped out higher than 1,100 cuts. Regardless of what steel you put up against it on this datasheet, the Big Brown Bear 15V has reigned supreme. So it should all be hunky-dory, right? Maybe. But there's one massive problem. The world's supply of 15V is drying up, and there's very little chance that it is ever coming back. In a thunderclap that was heard all around the world on December 5th, 2024, Crucible Industries sent a letter to its employees citing financial troubles, which went hand in hand with the intent to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy again. It would be the second time in the company's long-standing history that it had done so. The first was in 2009, which resulted in an asset sale to a company called JP Industries and a reforming of the company again months later. That said, Crucible Industries was reformed, and the steel plant in Syracuse, New York did get to stay open. While there were layoffs, Crucible was still open for business. This time it was sold to a foreign company called Aristeel, and there was no reforming of Crucible in Syracuse, New York. The world is still seeing the patented steels Crucible was manufacturing before. This time, they're just not made here in the USA. But if the Crucible steels are still being made, why is CPM 15V done for? The answer was made clear during a published interview between Dr. Laren Thomas and Niagara Specialty Metal, who was in the process of trying to buy up patented Crucible steel compositions.
We could, in theory, buy them all, but except for 15V. I think that the atomizing temperature on that is higher than what Carpenter or Era can do in their atomizing furnace. They both have said that they can't make 15V. So until we come up with an alternative there, I think that grade's going away.
Neither Aristeel or Carpenter had furnaces hot enough to properly atomize 15V. As a knife enthusiast and self-proclaimed steel snob, this marks a sad passage for what was one of the highest performing knife steels that one could get. Even if its potential wasn't truly realized without the special heat treat protocol from Sean Houston, the loss of an edge retention titan like 15V is pretty sobering. A steel that was part of the evolution of super steels as we know them is gone, and will likely fade into the backdrop. A memory of what once was and might never be again. There are still Spyderco knives in the Big Brown Bear 15V that are available on the market today, but that available inventory is waning, and once it's gone forever. I'll make sure to list some knives that are still available at this time in the description down below for those who would still like to experience this steel. For everyone else, we will be looking towards metallurgists like Dr. Laren Thomas to see if super steels meant specifically for knife making can fill the edge retention void left behind by 15V. The most exciting part is not knowing what's coming next for those who seek the bleeding edge of advancement and performance for knife super steels. But something tells me that this is in fact the beginning and not the end of the golden era of knife making.